Hi, this is Frank again from Triad Fort, and today I'm just gonna help you guys a little bit with beginning practicing or beginning to play the guitar. So a lot of times when you first start out, you don't really know where to start because there's such a broad range of music and skills that you can choose from. And the best way that I can tell you guys to start out, I can't really guide you on which music styles to like because I'm really into extreme compositions from classical composers. Like I'm a huge fan of Bach and Mozart especially, which they seem like common names, but the pieces I know are probably some of the least common pieces you've ever heard. And I'm also into extreme shred metal like Jason Becker, Cacophony. Iron Maiden is probably the most mainstream band that I like, and Dragon Force, Megadeth, stuff like that. I can't really force you guys to listen to those bands if you don't have the ear for it. So the best way I can explain to you guys of how to practice is to practice on, I'm going to do this with an electric. It applies the same for an acoustic because you don't really have much of a choice. When you're playing, you always have to think of some things. So most things that I think about is improving your technical skill, improving your rhythm, and improving just your overall sound quality. So in terms of technical skill, that would refer to all the things like being able to perform certain notes together, or being able to perform certain techniques like a legato, glissando, or more commonly known as hammer-ons and pull-offs with guitar, slides, stuff like that, or arpeggios, or chord sequences. That would all be technical skills. I suggest that you practice that pretty thoroughly a little bit each day and just try and master one trick before moving on to the next one. So don't say I'm going to do all slides. Well, say I'm going to do all slides for the first couple times, and after I master that, I'll move on to legato and stuff. And once you know a large amount of tricks, you can put it all together and try and play songs. In terms of rhythm just comes with listening to music and being able to do things there's a lot of things like clapping exercise that you always have to do. Those things really annoy me and bore me, but eventually, if you have a really good sense of rhythm, which I feel I have a pretty good sense of rhythm, I'm not sure if I'm excellent or amazing, but if you feel that you're well off, you can probably let off on that, because that's what I do, and I seem to be doing pretty good. And the other thing is just overall sound quality, which is what I'm going to be covering mostly in this video. So when you're practicing, you never should practice with distortion or any sort of effect. You should always practice first on the cleanest setting that you can put on your amp. So on my amp, that sounds something like this. Basically, most of the sound should be from the guitar's tone, rather than you forcing your own sound upon it or forcing it to sound like distorted. And I play everything like this. I play Megadeth riffs and Iron Maiden riffs like this. If you watch my classical piece, I even played Hangar 18 on a classical guitar. And what that does, it allows you to hear exactly what you're playing and what you're messing up. And if you have an acoustic guitar or a classical guitar or something that doesn't really use much amplification, you won't have this problem, because whatever the guitar's tone is what you're hearing. You can't really amplify it because it already is amplified. So what I mean by that is, let's say I'm playing a simple A minor chord progression. I'm going to play an A chord, a D chord, an A minor. Okay, let's go over this again. A minor, D minor, E, and G. So you can see that I purposely made mistakes on that. So the mistakes I made were basically my chord transitioning. So you're going to hear that. If I were to put distortion on it, which I should do now just to give you guys a brief example. I'll try to make the mistakes in the exact same spot, but you'll easily see that it's going to be harder to hear exactly where the mistakes are, because the whole thing will sound like one big mush. Hopefully what you can hear is that it sounds a lot better, but in reality, well, to some people it will sound a lot better, but in reality, it's not as much as articulated. So when you're practicing, you can hear exactly what I'm doing. So my picking, I might not like that specific style of finger picking, so I'll use my thumb instead to give it a more bassy tone. Maybe I want to increase the treble, so I'll pick closer to the bridge. That seems to be a good sounding A minor. So now I'll switch over to the D. And I realize that I have trouble with that chord progression. So I'll practice exactly that, and I'll practice that probably several times, switching from that specific chord to the other, which you can hear very distinctly on the clean setting that there is a significant problem with that. So, practicing things that you need and things that you don't, and basically doing a little bit of each of those. A good breakdown would be to spend at least 10 minutes a day on technical skills, to spend 5 minutes a day probably on rhythm studies if you can, or just by playing a normal song, and then the rest of the stuff like general sound quality should be most of your time practicing. And if you are going to play a song that's like a thrash metal or metal song or anything with distortion, practice it clean first, then after you're going to have to do some significant practicing with distortion to make sure you don't rob any tones or make a bunch of mistakes in order to wreck your sound of your song. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this video.